Hello and welcome. My name is Nick Wilkes and you are watching the Phoenix Focus podcast. Today I'd like to give you a little bit of history about myself and why I became interested in politics, particularly US politics. I think it all started in 2001 on an infamous date of September the 11th, when on the aftermath of that, I was absolutely horrified by what I saw that day, and I couldn't believe what happened afterwards. It just became unreal. But I digress. I'll come back to that. I used to be in the military. I did quite a stint in the military. I've had a number of jobs, loads of jobs. I've been forklift driver, postman, labourer, salesman, pub landlord, DJ, all sorts of things I've done in my life. But my biggest pride, I suppose, was being in the military. Now, 10 straight years of that time I spent in Germany. Got to speak German, of course. And what interested me, mainly from my time in Germany, was the history of the Second World War, mainly, because all of the barracks, I was in 4 different locations: Detmold, Celle, Soltau and Dortmund, the main places where I was stationed in Germany. And just about all of them were ex-Gestapo barracks. And so that interested me, how the people could put up with what was going on around there. I remember in Soltau, when it was after I'd left there, they actually built a hospital around the back of where the barracks were, and discovered hundreds and hundreds of bodies buried in the field where they were going to build the hospital. When they were digging them all up, doing the groundwork, that's when they discovered all these bodies there. Nobody knew that they'd been there at all. I do know that at the end of the war, one of the Gestapo leaders was dragged through the streets. So they weren't very happy with him in that time. But I couldn't understand how people could put up with it then, if that was the case. And it wasn't until, again, funnily enough, in Soltau, I took part in an 80-kilometre endurance march overnight through a blizzard. But every village we passed through, every town, they're all tiny little villages around there, and all the villages, every village you passed through, as you exited the village, had a little sign with the name of the village on, sort of crossed out to say you were leaving, and the name of the next village, 7 kilometres. Every village we came to was 7 kilometres from the next one. And that made me realise that in the days of the Second World War, in the 1940s, 1930s and 40s, people didn't have cars. People didn't get around. There wasn't a lot of contact between villages even. So people would stay more or less where they were. The only contact they had with the outside world really was through the radio, if they had a radio, and word of mouth. In the outlying villages, there probably weren't any newspapers. Newspapers would be in the cities, but probably not making it to the outlying villages. So anything could happen, and they would only know about it via the radio. So control the radio, and you control what people think. In the cities, control the papers, and you control what people think. So when the National Socialists came to power through their figurehead of Adolf Hitler, of course, who was a nobody really when he came out of the army, He went to work back for the army as a spy for the military intelligence, a spy going into these places, listening to the National Socialists was one of the groups that he went to sort of spy on. He got interested in it and actually stood up and spoke one day. And somebody spotted him, realised he was a good, enigmatic, charismatic speaker and very eloquent. And they recruited him, basically. So he was recruited by somebody at the top in the party to be their figurehead. Shades of Obama to me, that. An eloquent speaker, nothing behind it. Anyway, I digress. But they needed to control people. And the way they did that was by ended up controlling all the media. Goebbels' playbook is fascinating, and how he ended up controlling all the media, radios and papers. They controlled everything, so they could say exactly what they wanted about who they wanted, which is in a way how they got everybody to hate the Jews and comply with putting the Jews in camps and in ghettos, and then disposing of them. Once they were in the ghettos and the camps, they could do what they wanted with them because nobody would know what was going on. So this was all done through propaganda and control through that. Plus, of course, people were not very well educated in those days either, so they believed what they were told. They also believed that the government was looking out for their best interests. Also, they were also disgruntled by the way that they'd been treated at the end of the First World War. I mean, most people just went off and did as they were told to fight, as people have done for millennia. Just do as they're told. If you're told, right, you've got to go and fight for me, you go and fight. There were no dissent. There wasn't any dissent in those days. So they were badly treated by the Allies and basically put a boot around their necks. And inflation took off and was absolutely rampant. So they go out with a stack of money to go and buy a loaf of bread, and find by the time they got there, they had doubled in price. So they couldn't afford things. Money became almost worthless. I mean, people were actually lining their boots with money just to keep warm. Ridiculous the way things went then. Hopefully we'll never ever see that again. But yeah, so saw that if you control the media, you controlled everything. Didn't think anything more about it really. I mean, I had been to Belsen, visited Belsen concentration camp at Bergen, and there again you think, how did people in Bergen, and I can't remember the name of the village that's below where the camp was, Hone was another village around there, they said at the end of the war that they had no idea of what was going on. And people in Bergen, I find that hard to believe, because the actual railhead for the concentration camp, which is a few kilometres outside Bergen itself, it's in the midst between two villages, but the railhead was actually in Bergen. I've seen the railhead, and it's quite a march from there to the camp, but that's where the prisoners were unloaded, and then they had to march down the road to where the camp was, past a great big military barracks on the way down there, because there was a big training area there as well. So it was on the edge of the training area where they set the camp up. But anyway, going back from that, didn't think much more of it until after September 11th. I mean, I was angry, I was frustrated, I was fuming about how anyone could pull off something like that, something so atrocious. How could anyone do that? and I was mad and fuming against the people that were supposed to have done it. And it was only afterwards when I started seeing extra things coming out about what had happened in the attacks, and the reports of what they were saying in the media had actually happened, and what the government was saying had happened. The officials had said it happened, and experts had said that happened. And I thought, am I the only one seeing this? This is wrong. This is so very wrong. I felt like a little boy watching the Emperor's New Clothes and thinking, why isn't everybody seeing this? Why isn't anybody protesting about this? And again, I didn't realise at that time that the government controlled the media. Still do, by the way. Or not, the present government don't control the media. But the last lot did. And they're still right in the opposition. They're still controlling the media. Apart from Fox News. They're about the only sensible ones in all of this. And Newsmax. But NBC, MSNBC, CBS, CNN, Washington Times, is it New York Post is the other one, I think. They're all controlled by the Democrats. So you'll never see anything positive. I don't think actually there was only Fox actually covered the two astronauts two stranded astronauts. They all said they weren't stranded. Yes, they were. They weren't coming back by a lifeboat. The two stranded astronauts, when they came back last week, it was only covered on Fox. None of the others covered it. That's disgusting. That's a monumental thing. But they were abandoned up there by Biden, because Elon Musk did volunteer to go up and bring them back, and he turned them down because it would have been politically embarrassing. It's absolutely ridiculous and shameless, quite honest with you. But anyway, going back to 2001, it was the aftermath and the planes. There were supposed to have been 4 hijacked planes. Fair enough, 4 hijacked planes. All hijacked by these terrorists, who it turns out afterwards were actually CIA operatives. They were recruited and brought over by the CIA. We'll go into that at some stage. And there is proof of that, by the way. And it was the planes themselves. I mean, I've seen a lot of plane crashes. I'm sure you have too. Lots of scenes of plane crashes where there is debris everywhere. Bodies, seats, luggage, spread out all over fields and over mountainsides. It's a horrible thing, the plane crash. But it's there. And then the investigators go in, pick up all the bits, put it all together to find out what happened. None of that happened on 9/11. None of it. There was a plane that supposedly went down in Shanksville, and even the local coroner said that when he got there, he was expecting to see loads of bodies and what have you. And when he got there, he didn't have a job to do. He says all there was a little hole in the ground with somebody looked as though somebody had thrown some rubbish in and set fire to it. That's all there was. According to the official report, it crashed into the ground and buried itself underground. Really? These people not know physics? Absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. The Pentagon. You see pictures of the Pentagon. The pictures of the Pentagon before where the plane supposedly hit it. It's just got a hole in the side, and there are drums of cable because the part that where the plane supposedly hit was refurbished. It'd just been newly refurbished, and the accounts office had just been moved into there. Just been moved into there. There was a reason why the accounts were moved into there, and it's all to do with I think it was $6.23 trillion black hole in accounts, which the accounts department are going to look into. That was announced the day before by Donald Rumsfeld, and funnily enough, the next day, all the accounts were burnt and nothing was ever mentioned of it ever again. Strange that, isn't it? Yeah, but this had been newly refurbished and work had been done on this section of the building. There were cable drums outside, still outside, even though the plane supposedly hit there, and then it collapsed. Then the roof collapsed, and the official explanation is that the plane took out. Oh, it disappeared inside, by the way. No part of the plane has ever been found because it all disappeared. And I think they actually said it evaporated. Mind blowing, mind blowing. Some of the explanations that they came out with for that. I remember one of the couple of eyewitnesses. One of them was a taxi driver who lied through his eye teeth and actually said on closed camera that, you know, I'm lying. His wife was in the CIA. And another one who I believe was a CIA operative working in the media, was an anchorman, and the CIA had infiltrated all the media. So I'm not, allegedly, he probably was CIA, but he was working in the media as an anchorman, driving past at the time, said he saw the plane hit. And then later on, when he was questioned about, all right, if the plane hits, how come there's no debris outside? And his actual words were, well, as the plane hit, the wings folded back and it went through this tiny little hole. Astonishing. And people believed it. Crazy, crazy, crazy. It's only afterwards when the official version came out and it showed the tracking of the plane and the way it went, and it hit, I think, 4L5 lamppost before it's supposed to have hit the building. We went down the one side of the main road, supposedly, and then veered in. Actually, the witnesses on the other side of the road said that the plane did fly over them. There were policemen as well in a garage that said, pointed out exactly which way the plane had come and gone. The plane did come out that way, but it didn't hit the Pentagon. It flew over the Pentagon and disappeared off. Let's go back to the first plane to hit Tower 1. Now, that wasn't supposed to be seen by anyone. All you'd hear is a big bang because it was so high up. That's all you hear was a big bang, and look up and go, oh, what happened there? You'd hear the plane and not see it. But a French film crew were doing a documentary on New York firemen down in the streets, and they were doing something with a fire hydrant when when they heard this jet go overhead, and they swung the camera up just to see something hit the building. Yeah, and where it hit the building. And I'll go into why it hit the building where it did in a later episode. But that's all when you follow the money. Then you'll understand why the plane hit the building where it did and why it had to. And then, of course, the second plane hit. Now, no matter which picture you see, which video you see, all right, they're not the best quality because in those days they weren't. But it's not a commercial jet. It's not a commercial jet. It's a military plane. You can see it's a military plane. Now, somebody said afterwards, oh, I've got this bit of fuselage with windows in it. It's not a military plane. I've flown on military planes. I've flown to the Falklands on military planes. I've flown to America, to Washington. I've flown into Dulles. It's named after one of the biggest crooks in American history. I've flown to the Dulles airport in Washington on military planes with windows. But anyway, yeah. So the second plane that hit Tower 2 was a military jet. You could tell it was a military jet. And in fact, one of the engines that was found afterwards in the street was from a military jet. It wasn't from the plane that supposedly hit the building. Supposedly. It didn't. And there's a lot of camera trickery went on then as well, involving the networks. Now, this is the part that I couldn't understand, why the coverage on the different news networks could be manipulated to the point where they could hoodwink the public. I couldn't understand how that could happen. I didn't realise at that time that all the networks were under the control of, well, the party. I'll call it the party, but it's not the party, it's the people behind the party, commonly known as the deep state. What is the deep state? It's the power behind the throne. They are up in arms at the moment because there's a man trying to uncover all of this and dismantle it all, which is why they're trying to shoot him. They're trying to litigate against him, punish him, bankrupt him, put him in prison. They tried all sorts against him and failed, I'm glad to say. And not only did he dodge a bullet in the last election, before the last election, but the country and, I have to say, the world, because we all seem to be following the same lead that the US was been following. We've all dodged that bullet. I hate to think what would happen if Harris had got in. I would have been dumbfounded. I couldn't believe that people were actually voting for her. I understand the party politics in normal people, you know. We have it here in the UK. You've got Conservatives and you've got Labour, and basically we've only got two-party system. The Liberals, you can't even talk about. The Green Party, don't forget about them. Although we have got Reform coming up now, which is actually, I thought, oh, good, a new party. But I'm getting a bit worried about them as well. The Conservatives in this country, they're the sensible ones up to a point. They get in, they sort things out, then people get bored of them and they vote Labour in. Well, Labour are backed by the trade unions, same as the Democrats, backed by the trade unions, and they're supposed to be the party of the working people, hence the name Labour. But they get in there and they spend like they're drunken sailors. They almost bankrupt the country, and then people and taxes go up as a result. People get annoyed about that, and so they vote the Conservatives back in. They try and sort it out. They just about get it sorted out, and people go, I've had enough of this. This is boring. Let's get Labour back in again. And it's a constant cycle going on. I'm fed up of it, quite honest with you. I am really fed up of it. And just a lot of people just can't be arsed with politics. Really can't, because it's the same old all the time. It's this cyclic revolving door of parties, quite honest with you. But yeah, so anyway, 9/11. There are a lot of mysteries involved with 9/11, and the official narrative that came out, which was quite ridiculous, is so full of flaws as to be not worth even reading, to be honest with you. The reconstructions of of how the buildings collapsed. Ridiculous. Building 7 is a fantastic example of a controlled demolition. I remember seeing one guy, I think it was Norwegian, demolition expert, and the guy who was an expert on demolishing buildings, and they showed him building 7 go down, and he went, good job, good job, couldn't have done it better myself. And they said, no, this came down because of office fires. And he went, really? No. So it was controlled demolition. That's definitely controlled demolition. And they said it must have taken a long time to set that up. And they went, well, it went down in a couple of hours. And they went, they must have worked fast and had a big team. What they aren't saying is that, of course, it was all set up beforehand, because a lot of work had done on in building 7, reinforcing floors, because massive vaults had gone in. The gold that was stored underneath building 7 in a massive vault all disappeared. Also, the reason I said that building 1, where the alleged plane hit, there was a reason why it hit when it did, where it did. That was all to do with money and a big scandal that was going to unfold involving bearer bonds, and also involving George Bush's father, the ex-president. He was involved in a group called the Carlton Group, and there was a big bearer bond scandal. It was going to be the biggest thing in American history, and that was all coming out on the 12th of September, the day after. Now all the people, I'll go into it now a little bit, all the agencies involved, it was the FBI, I think the Marshal Service, Treasury, all these people were ordered to bring their evidence to a meeting in building 1 for 8 o'clock on the morning of September the 11th. And the room where the person who actually called the meeting didn't turn up. But the plane hit the building. I'm not sure it's exactly in the exact position of where that room was, but not far off, if not, of where that room was, where the meeting was being held. Hence, evidence destroyed. Now, all of these agencies had officers in building 7. So building 7 had to go as well. That was destroyed too. Yeah, it's a lot to go into. Quite a lot to go into. The Twin Towers and the whole complex had to be demolished, or it had to be refurbished, because all the steel inside the structures was coated in asbestos. They had an order that they had to clean it all off. It all had to be taken off, and all had to be redone with something that was non-asbestos. And that was going to cost billions. Billions. At the time, they also had to redo all the internets, because companies were moving out, because so high up they weren't getting internet, and the high-speed internet. They had ISDN lines in there, but they weren't adequate anymore. So all the finance companies and everything that were in there were all moving out. So the building was barely occupied, really, which is how they got away with setting the explosives. We'll go into that as well. There's a lot more behind it all, but I couldn't understand. I thought, yeah, journalists are going to investigate this. They're going to be investigative journalists, are going to look into this, and they're going to get to the bottom of it. Nothing. Tumbleweeds. Absolutely nothing happened. And we're now, what, 24 years on? 23 and a half years on from this, and nothing has been done about it. no reports. The 9/11 Commission is still held as being the way forward, the truth, which it's a pack of lies. The whole thing is a pack of lies. You investigate any of it when they say there were no secondary explosions. Loads of videos of the news anchors and news people in the streets going, "Oh, that was an explosion. Oh, I just heard another explosion." We're hearing loads of secondary explosions. There were none, according to the official report. There was no molten steel in the building, according to the official report. Yet the firemen, funnily enough, on that French couple's video that they were making of the fire department, on there the firemen actually say he went down in the basement, and there's weeks later there's a pool of molten steel down there that's still red hot and molten underneath the building. It's crazy. Even though jet fuel doesn't get to the right temperature to melt steel. So where's all the molten steel come from? I did hear one explanation was that all the furniture caught fire and added to it, and still didn't get hot enough. Right, that's just part of the 9/11 thing. There's a lot more to go through in that, and we'll get on to that. How they came up with the name of Osama bin Laden, even though they at the time of the 9/11 attack. George Bush in a school coming out of there and saying that the Secret Service man had come in, not whisked him away because he might be a target, or the school might be a target because everybody knew he was there. No, they didn't do that. They just let him there. Just sat there listening to school kids reciting stories, and then came out, and the first thing he said to the press was that he'd seen the first plane go in on the TV. That's a lie. Nobody had seen the first plane going in at that point. It was only afterwards when the I can't remember the name. I'll remember the name of the brothers, the French filmmakers, sold their footage, and they got top dollar for that as well because it was the only film of it. There's also other parts that you pick up on that film, and I'll show you that one. Actually, show you a clip of the film of the first plane and the second plane going in. There's some unusual things happen. Not only the fact that it was a commercial jet, and the first one, you don't really know what that was. Don't think it was big enough for the commercial jet, but we'll have a look into that again. So anyway, so I thought, how could they get away with it? How did they think they were going to get away with it? It was only afterwards that you got pilots for truth. The people actually did start complaining. Pilots for truth, architects for truth, engineers for truth, all these people, all the For Truth network, all coming out with questions. Like, for instance, the Pilots for Truth saying that the official report of how the plane came down and swerved in to line up with the building was impossible with that aircraft. And they proved that in flight simulators. The wings kept falling off. Every time they tried to make that turn, the wings kept falling off the plane. So it had to be a jet or a plane that was designed for that sort of thing. Hence, military. No commercial aircraft could have done that, made that turn. There's also radar footage of the planes being intercepted by two other planes, who then veer off and land at, I think it's Andrews Air Force Base. Again, I'll show you all that. I'll come up with all that. But yes, so going back to it, how did they think they were going to get away with it? They must have realised that they could get away with it. Obviously, I didn't realise at that time that the media was under their control. But how did they think they were going to get away with it? they must have done something before to think that they could get away with it. And that's when I got interested in the JFK assassination. Obviously, I'd seen the Oliver Stone film and thought it was disgusting. That, you know, this guy looks as though he'd been set up. Didn't think much more of it than that. But when I started doing investigations into that and realised that others had been doing investigations into it, but just being called conspiracy theorists, it was actually from that investigation that the name conspiracy theory was first coined. He looked at the Warren Commission, which was a total whitewash. Total whitewash. All the stories that came out about Oswald and who he was, realised that that was all false. All of it. Absolutely all of it is false. He was a lot more complex person and not as stupid as people thought, as people were led to believe. But yeah, so they got away with it. They got away with it, and they had done since 1963. So in 2001, why did they think they were not going to get away with it again? All right, there's more cameras around nowadays, but so what? Still got the media. As long as they get the message right, people will believe it. People want to believe that their government is working for them and not against them. Why? Is another question. And the motivation. In all crimes, you've got motivation and opportunity. Right? They had the opportunity, and we'll go into that. And they had the motive. And it's not just one or two motives. There's quite a few motives. And it was all solved by crashing planes into buildings as previously planned, even under JFK. Right? The plan had been put forward under JFK for doing the similar sort of thing. That's Operation Northwood. And we'll go into that as well. But yeah, JFK was assassinated, and it wasn't Oswald. Oswald did not shoot anything on that day. He was a patsy, and we'll go into the history of that at some stage. But for now, just want you to know that in the US, in the UK, and around the world, we all dodged a bullet in November. Thank you for watching. If you got value from this video, then please don't forget, like, share, subscribe. If you want to help more, then buy me a cup of coffee. Cheers. Bye.